She adjusted her uniform, trying to hide the tear in her dress, unaware that this night would change everything. The guests laughed, glasses clinked, and in the glitter of chandeliers, one woman's cruelty would spark a storm no one expected. She thought she was humiliating a waitress, just another black servant at a wealthy gala. But what she didn't know was who was watching, and how one reckless act of racism would unravel her world. Because sometimes the line between power and shame is just one torn dress away. The ballroom shimmered with gold light and polished marble floors, where laughter floated like perfume and money spoke louder than manners. Among the staff moving quietly through the glittering crowd was Amara, a young black woman who worked double shifts to help her mother pay rent and keep her little brother in school. She wasn't born into luxury, but she carried herself with grace, her smile soft, her eyes determined, and her spirit quietly unbreakable. To the guests, she was invisible, just another waitress balancing trays and fading into the background of other people's wealth. But tonight was different. It was a charity gala for one of the city's most influential families, a night when everyone wanted to be seen, when appearances meant everything. And Amara, wearing a borrowed black dress that hugged her modest figure, looked far too poised to blend in. She'd been called in last minute to help serve, not realizing that this event would bring her face to face with people whose wealth was only matched by their prejudice. Still, she moved through the crowd with quiet dignity, her every step deliberate, her every glance careful. She learned long ago that in rooms like these, one wrong expression could invite disdain, or worse. As the orchestra played a soft waltz, Amara caught glimpses of glittering diamonds, champagne bubbles rising like tiny golden ghosts, and the hollow smiles of those who thought they owned the world. She often wondered how so much ugliness could hide behind so much beauty. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. Keep your head high, no matter how low they try to make you feel. So she did, always. Then a murmur swept through the room, a subtle shift in tone, like a chill slipping under the door. A tall, elegant woman in a white gown had entered, her arm wrapped around a man who radiated wealth and quiet confidence. The kind of man people turned to look at. The kind of man who commanded attention without saying a word. Amara didn't know it yet, but that man's gaze would soon fall on her. And the woman beside him, his wife, would see it too. For now, though, Amara focused on her work. She moved past tables draped in crystal and silk, offering smiles that weren't returned and thank yous that went unspoken. Beneath the surface, though, she felt something, a tension she couldn't name. The air was thick with vanity and pride, but tonight it felt heavier. Outside, the rain tapped softly against the grand windows, a rhythm out of sync with the music inside. Amara took a brief moment near the back corridor, adjusting her apron, unaware that her small act of composure was being watched. From across the room, that same elegant woman, the hostess, had noticed her. The way she moved, the way the light caught her face. Too graceful, too confident, not the way a waitress was supposed to be. And jealousy, born from insecurity and arrogance, began to stir. In a world where worth was measured by skin tone and social rank, Amara's quiet dignity was an unspoken rebellion. She didn't need jewels to shine, and that truth, though unspoken, would soon ignite something far darker than envy. The night went on, the music louder, the crowd drunker, and the line between elegance and cruelty thinner than ever. Amara continued serving with poise, never suspecting that before the last song played, her world and theirs would shatter in front of everyone. Because beneath the glitter and the gowns, prejudice waited patient, venomous, and ready to strike. The night moved like a dream wrapped in glass and music, elegant, distant, and fragile. Amara weaved through the crowd, balancing a tray of champagne flutes, her posture perfect despite the ache in her feet. The murmurs around her blurred into one long hum of laughter and arrogance. She'd done dozens of events like this, but tonight felt different, heavier somehow, as if the air itself was watching. At the far end of the room, the hostess, Victoria Langford, smiled her well-practiced smile. Every movement she made was deliberate, a performance of grace. But behind her diamond earrings and polished manners, envy was building. She had seen her husband, Ethan Langford, the man everyone admired, glance at Amara more than once. It wasn't lust, but curiosity, respect, recognition of something pure in a room full of artifice. And that, to Victoria, was unforgivable. As Amara served another round of drinks, she heard whispers, not loud enough to be clear, but sharp enough to cut. Who hired her? She's too bold-looking. Probably snuck in. Every word felt like a pinprick under her skin, but she kept her head high. She knew the rules: silence, patience, composure. Yet, beneath that calm, something trembled, a storm of exhaustion from years of pretending not to hear. Then it happened. Amara stepped toward a table near the front, where Victoria stood surrounded by her friends. She extended the tray with practiced grace. One of the women reached for a glass, but in that same moment, Victoria's hand shot out and grabbed the edge of Amara's dress. The sharp sound of tearing fabric cut through the music. Gasps rippled through the room. "Careful," Victoria said coolly, voice dripping with venom disguised as politeness. "Next time, wear something appropriate for your position." The crowd went silent. The band faltered. All eyes turned to Amara. Her face burned not from shame, but from the raw sting of disbelief. She hadn't done anything wrong. She hadn't even spoken. Yet here she was, humiliated under the golden lights of people who would never see her as more than the help. For a heartbeat, no one moved. And then, from across the room, a glass clinked against marble. Ethan. He had seen everything. The tear in Amara's dress, the cruelty behind his wife's smirk, the silence of every guest pretending not to notice. Amara's hands trembled as she tried to steady the tray. Part of her wanted to flee, to disappear, before her tears betrayed her. But something inside her refused. She stood her ground, spine straight, eyes locked on the chandelier above as if it were the only thing holding her together. Victoria turned, satisfied with the power she'd just displayed, and laughed lightly to her friends. "Oh, don't look so serious. It was just a little accident." But it was, and Ethan knew it. Minutes passed in uneasy silence as the music hesitated, then resumed, forced and hollow. Amara stepped back into the corridor, the sound of laughter echoing behind her. The fabric of her dress hung torn, but it wasn't the material that hurt. It was the weight of every unspoken word, every injustice she'd swallowed in her life. Tonight, it had all come to the surface. In the service hallway, she leaned against the wall, chest rising and falling. Her reflection in a silver tray caught her eye, tired, wounded, but unbroken. "They want to make me small," she thought, "but I won't be invisible." Meanwhile, inside, Ethan excused himself. The room's glamour had turned poisonous. He walked toward the corridor where Amara had disappeared, ignoring the shocked glances. His steps were steady, his face unreadable. Victoria watched him go, her smile faltering for the first time that evening. Something was shifting. The very control she prided herself on was slipping. Outside, thunder rolled over the city, faint but growing. Inside, beneath the chandeliers and murmurs, reputations hung by threads. Amara didn't know it yet, but what had just happened, the tear, the humiliation, wasn't the end of her story. It was the spark. And by the end of the night, the truth about who she really was and who she was connected to would shatter every lie in that gilded room. The gala had become a theater of whispers. Eyes darted, conversations turned sharp, and the tension was a living thing, thick, electric, impossible to ignore. Amara stood near the exit, clutching the side of her torn dress, trying to steady her breath. The sting of humiliation still burned across her chest, but deeper than that was something else, resolve. Inside, the illusion of glamour was crumbling. Ethan Langford stood before the crowd, his jaw tight, his expression dark with fury he was barely containing. His wife, Victoria, stood beside him, pretending not to notice the damage she'd caused. The guests shifted uncomfortably, trapped between their curiosity and their cowardice. Then came the voice, Ethan's, low but commanding. "Stop the music." The room froze. The violins silenced mid-note, glasses stopped mid-toast. Every head turned. He didn't shout. He didn't need to. His words cut through the air with a cold precision that made even the servers stop moving. "An apology is owed," he said, his eyes locked on Victoria. "Now." Victoria's smile wavered. "Ethan, really, it was just." "Now." The word hit like a hammer. Every pretense of elegance shattered. The same guests who had laughed moments earlier now looked away, pretending to examine their napkins, unwilling to take sides. Victoria's face flushed crimson, rage, and fear twisting into something uglier than either. She turned toward Amara, who stood near the doorway, still trembling, but standing tall. "Fine," Victoria spat, her voice dripping with poison. "I'm sorry if you felt embarrassed, but maybe next time you'll remember your place." Before she could finish, Ethan's voice cut in again, louder this time, firm with finality. "Her place." He stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "Do you even know who she is?" A stunned silence filled the room. Victoria's painted smile faltered. Ethan continued, his voice steady, but sharp enough to draw blood. "You tore the dress of the very woman whose designs built this event. The woman who funded your so-called charity auction tonight." Gasps rippled across the ballroom like aftershocks. Guests turned, whispering, disbelieving. Amara blinked, her chest tightening. The truth she had kept hidden to avoid exactly this kind of spectacle was now out in the open. She wasn't just a waitress. She was Amara Collins, a rising designer who had built a name quietly, anonymously, to prove her worth without her father's connections or her husband's name. Ethan took another step toward her, his gaze softening. "She's my wife." The words landed like a thunderclap. The chandeliers above seemed to hum with the collective shock. Victoria's hand flew to her chest as if struck. Her face drained of color, her posture collapsing under the weight of what she'd done. "You," she stammered, eyes wide. "You married her." Ethan didn't answer. He didn't need to. His silence was a verdict. Amara felt a storm inside her, relief tangled with pain. She hadn't wanted this revealed here, not like this. But as she looked around the room, the same faces that had sneered at her minutes ago, now gawking in shame, she realized there was power in truth. Victoria, desperate, turned to the guests. "This is ridiculous." She was pretending to be staff. How was I supposed to know? Ethan's expression hardened. By showing respect to anyone, regardless of who they are. His words hung in the air, cold and righteous. Victoria tried to speak again, but the murmurs were no longer in her favor. People she once commanded now looked away. A few even stepped toward Amara, their expressions apologetic. The shift was slow, but irreversible, the empire of arrogance beginning to crumble under its own hypocrisy. Amara's heart pounded. She should have felt vindicated, but instead there was a hollow ache, a sadness that even humiliation couldn't erase. She had seen the truth tonight, how quickly people's kindness depended on status, how deep the roots of prejudice ran beneath polished smiles. As she met Victoria's trembling eyes one last time, she didn't feel anger, just exhaustion. She turned to leave. The crowd parted silently. No applause, no pity, only the heavy weight of realization settling in the room like smoke. And as the doors closed behind her, thunder roared outside, shaking the glass chandeliers. It felt like a warning, or maybe a cleansing. Inside, Victoria stood alone under the fractured light, her perfect world finally cracking. Because sometimes it takes one cruel act to expose a lifetime of ugliness. And that night, beneath all the glitter, the truth had finally come to light. The rain had stopped by the time Amara stepped out of the ballroom, but the air still carried the weight of everything that had just unfolded. The city lights shimmered through the mist, reflecting in the puddles like broken glass. She stood beneath the grand marble steps, clutching the torn edge of her dress, a wound and a symbol all at once. For the first time that night, she let herself breathe. Really breathe. Behind her, the music never resumed. The gala, the pinnacle of high society, had fallen into silence. And in that silence, truths had been exposed that no amount of wealth or polish could cover again. Ethan followed her outside moments later. He didn't speak. There was nothing he could say that would erase what had been done. Instead, he stood beside her, letting the quiet speak for them both. In that stillness, Amara realized that sometimes the loudest form of justice isn't revenge, it's truth echoing through the people who witnessed it. The next morning, the incident was everywhere. Guests had filmed it, half in shock, half in guilt, and the footage spread like wildfire across social media. Socialite tears waitress's dress, finds out she's a millionaire designer. The headlines fed on the irony, but beneath the clicks and outrage, something deeper stirred. Comment sections flooded with disbelief, support, and painful recognition. Black women shared their own stories, times they'd been dismissed, talked down to, or humiliated for simply existing in spaces they were told they didn't belong. It wasn't just about Amara anymore. It was about every person who had ever been made to feel small in a room they had every right to stand in. Victoria disappeared from the public eye, her name quickly becoming a cautionary tale. Her brand deals dissolved, her friends distanced themselves, and for once, she couldn't hide behind power. The same eyes that once adored her now saw her for what she truly was. But Amara, she didn't celebrate her downfall. She didn't need to. True justice, she realized, wasn't in someone else's ruin, it was in reclaiming her dignity. Weeks later, Amara returned to her studio. The torn dress, carefully mended, hung on a mannequin near the window, not to erase what had happened, but to remind her of how far she had come. That dress became part of her next collection, a piece called Unbroken. It was raw, emotional, and real. And when it debuted, it wasn't just fashion, it was a statement. She spoke softly during the show's closing speech. This isn't just my story. It's the story of anyone who's ever been underestimated, judged, or silenced. It's proof that grace can't be torn apart, and that no one's worth is defined by another's prejudice. Her words resonated far beyond the room. They echoed across screens, hearts, and timelines, a reminder that dignity doesn't come from money or status. It comes from self-respect and truth. In the months that followed, Amara used her growing platform to highlight underrepresented designers. and fund scholarships for young Black women pursuing careers in fashion and the arts. She knew change didn't happen in a single night, but it started with awareness, with moments like hers that cracked the illusion of post-racial progress wide open. Because what happened to her wasn't just a personal insult, it was a reflection of something systemic, something still woven into the fabric of society. The need to remind people that equality shouldn't depend on titles, wealth, or who's watching. And though Amara moved forward, she carried the memory of that night, not as pain, but as purpose. Sometimes it takes one public act of cruelty to remind the world what private dignity looks like. So as you watch this, ask yourself, how many more Amaras are out there, fighting to be seen, fighting to be heard, fighting to simply exist in rooms that should welcome them? And more importantly, when you see it happen again, will you stay silent? Or will you finally speak up